Hi, I'm Greg Schaefer, and welcome to the virtual CISO moment. David Kim joins us today. He is lead AI, GRC, cybersecurity, PCI DSS consultant, does so much more. Helped me out over 20 years ago. We'll catch up on that in just a moment. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, I'm a real human, not a bot. I always like waving. Good morning, everyone.
So happy to have you here. Yes, I've never considered you as a bot, but would like to hear about your path, your history, how you got started in information security. And I know you've obviously been involved in a variety of different things. Just start from the beginning and take us through
I
through to where you're at today.
okay. Well, I was one of the interesting topics, Greg. I was speaking at a conference 2 weeks ago, and down the hall, some guy was talking about how not to hire a North Korean employee. So I always wear my stars and stripes. Reiterate that up. Yeah, I was born in the U.S. and I am a USA citizen. Having said that, I've been fortunate to come from Korean immigrant parents who came after the Korean War and basically ended up in New York City at the age of 16. So I'm the first generation born Korean American who, when you're born in a Korean family, your choices are doctor, lawyer, or engineer. So I became an electrical engineer, uh, University of Illinois. And to tell you how old I am, my first job was right after AT&T divestiture for a big six accounting firm doing PBX trunking design and analysis using an Erlang chart.
And probably 99.9% of the people watching and listening to this don't know what that is.
I hope you never have to experience that, but an Erlang chart is a two-dimensional, basically exponential mathematical chart that allows you to do trunking analysis for 0% blocking for inbound calls.
Hmm.
So you have to use this chart with a ruler to calculate probability and blocking statistics. So back then in 1985, there was no such thing as security consultants or cybersecurity. Okay, this is 1985, right before local area networks were born.
Right.
So divestiture, PBX, there's no more structured wiring. You own the wiring in your building, and now you own the phone system. Okay. So the beginnings of security for me started with the PBX and looking at trunking, the way they do class of service routing, the way they do trunking for international toll calling and internal direct dial calling. So security was all about securing the dial tone and making sure back then in the 80s, early 90s, it was all about fraud and fraudulent long distance calling. So
Right.
that was
Using the
security
whistle and all that, right?
pretty much. So
Yeah.
that's my first taste of technology and security coming right out of college as an electrical engineer. And then what happened, if you recall, well, some of you won't recall, but 1988 was the year of the local area network.
Hmm.
And it was a coax cable.
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
back
Thin
then,
net. Thin net. Yeah.
ThinNet,
Yeah.
ArcNet, if you
Yeah.
remember that,
Uh-huh.
and Mac. Okay, so local area networking back in the late 80s was Novell Netware
Hmm.
and using a coax cable with T connectors. So right around then, I think like that was my second job, and I worked in a structured wiring networking business. Again, post divestiture, so all the cabling and networking was now born on the customer. Okay, so from there, uh, I think I then evolved into learning the business of consulting through Ernst and Winnie at the time and Towers Parent, both consulting firms on the East Coast. That's where I learned the business of consulting, Greg. I'm sure you're now well adept at the business of consulting with a letter of understanding or a statement of work with tacit
I
deliverables.
I've learned a lot of stuff the hard way, that's for sure.
Okay. So luckily I got that big six accounting polish, if you will, for doing professional consulting. And that led me to doing my first security assessment and strategy for the state of Tennessee. And this was in the year 2000. 2001, before there was cybersecurity and privacy laws. Okay, HIPAA just came out in, I believe, 1996,
Yeah,
but nobody
yeah.
really jumped on the HIPAA bandwagon until 1998, and now, here it is, early 2000s,
Yeah, the
and
the 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 balance of security back then, like where I was in my career, was actually trying to keep people from overusing network stuff. That's about it. So if we were trying to block stuff, it was only just about performance. That's it.
bandwidth, performance, making sure that higher ed email system was working right. That
Hmm.
was a lifeblood back then.
Absolutely.
So after I did the first security strategy for the state of Tennessee, I became a Cisco certified instructor. And this is when Cisco Systems stock was like $28 in the year 2000. And they just implemented the Cisco Training Partner Program, and they started to outsource all of their global Cisco router training. So I jumped on that bandwagon in the year 2001. I think I
Hmm.
was the second Cisco certified instructor in the world when they outsourced this. And from there, I rode the IP internet wave from 2001 to 2005. I built a company called Network Evolutions. And
Hmm.
in Network Evolutions, I started to do internetworking, bridges, router, Cisco router training courses. And that's how I met your boss at MTSU, the CIO at that time, Lucinda Lee.
Right, and that's actually to how we met because I believe Lucinda contracted with your firm to basically make sure that I wasn't doing anything bad.
Let me tell you something. I had a lot of respect for Lucinda at the time because she was one of the most futuristic thinking CIOs I've ever met at that
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
She wanted pure IP convergence, Greg, voice, video, data, multimedia. She saw that already in the year 2001.
Right.
There was no such thing as voice over IP and VoIP IP convergence yet. Okay. So she only had asynchronous transfer mode, ATM, as a core campus backbone as part of her thinking and strategy. Okay. Luckily, she didn't move in that direction. I actually did a network assessment report. I tried to find it from 24 years of archiving, but I couldn't find it in time for this. Uh,
I think I might actually have it. I'll have to look through because I'm a pack rat.
yeah.
But I remember that, and I remember our dabbling into ATM at the time. For the folks out there, that was a networking technology, asynchronous transfer mode, and yes, it allowed for true convergence of voice, video, and data during a time that we didn't have it. But it really, from my perspective, it was not mature enough at that point in time to
Was it?
work at least in our environment. It's like there was just too many things too many variables where it could break and you know at Middle Tennessee State our telecommunications and network departments were separate. In fact, I don't even think telecommunications was under IT at that time.
It
And
wasn't.
so
Yeah.
it was imperative to make sure that we didn't mess up anything voice wise, and the network was just being. I mean, that was also during a period of time when you had a lot of the students using stuff like Napster and all that. It was starting to
Uh,
become really saturated. Students don't understand it today, but back then it was a big draw for students to go to college because they would finally get high-speed internet instead of dial-up.
and an
I mean,
email address.
and an email address. And these are things that are like, I mean, people today, kids today, like
They don't have a
they
concept.
couldn't understand it, but it was a big deal in capital letters back there. So,
Yep.
so I'm chasing all that. She wants to do all this convergence. You're trying to help us wrap our heads around what the technology is going. And I froze you to death almost.
At that time, you were, hey, for ladies and gentlemen, at that time, Greg Schaefer was, I mean, literally a postgraduate punk kid working in the MTSU IT department. And he was tasked to drive me around the entire campus to look at data centers and wiring closets, except his pickup truck didn't have a heater. And it was,
No, it did. It didn't work.
it didn't work.
Yeah, it didn't work.
So, unbeknownst to Greg at that time, being a scrawny Asian guy, I was freezing my ass off. But nonetheless, we accomplished our walkthrough, got the documentation, took pictures of every wiring closet, and was able to fulfill the project. But that's my lasting memory of Mr. Greg Schaefer, everybody.
So, and now your entire career has brought you through different technologies, different evolutions, no pun intended, based on
Yes. So
your business.
the IP convergence that happened in the mid to late 2000s, Greg. Now regulatory compliance laws start popping up left and right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
On top of HIPAA, you came from higher ed, so FERPA was been around since the 70s. But now
Mm-hmm.
you've got over 10 regulatory compliance laws. And here's the number one thing I see poking SMB and enterprise, but predominantly small to medium-sized businesses, is privacy laws. Everyone talks about cybersecurity and security awareness, but I always add the word security and privacy.
Mm-hmm.
Greg, I add that because most SMB owners, they may have a website with a contact us web page as simple and mundane as first name, last name, company, email address, and phone number is. You are now acting as a data collector. And guess what? There are 21 US states that now have a privacy law about that. It's not just California CCPA. There are 20 other states in the US, but these are only 4 to 5 years old. So many small business owners aren't even aware of the fact that these new privacy laws are impacting them. Okay. So when I do annual risk assessments for SMBs, I'm adding in there a new domain for privacy, particularly because many of these SMBs, as you're aware, are doing their own marketing, their own data collection of prospects. They could have something on their website or LinkedIn, or hiring a third-party marketing company to collect personal identifiable information.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm finding out is that's one of those new risk items facing SMB that's literally poking them in the eye because they don't even know they have to be privacy compliant.
So that's a little bit of a conundrum for the security industry because um, sometimes folks out there in corporate world, they'll equate the terms security and privacy. They'll see them as almost exactly the same thing, which they're not. There are elements to each, particularly in security. We want to make sure that we're taking care of the controls around who can have access to the information. But we're not concerned in security as far as authorization and use, which is the privacy side. And so it seems like that the common argument, if you will, is that privacy doesn't really fall under security per se traditionally. It's more of a legal thing, but that's been sort of evolving. Where do you think the responsibility for privacy should lie? Should it be with like the CISO of an organization? Should it be with the legal of an organization, or something else?
I would call it, most organizations, if you're not publicly traded, do not have a chief compliance officer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the chief compliance officer usually is in the legal general counsel department in these large enterprises that I work with. Okay. If they have that human, that's the human looking at regulatory compliance horizontally across the entire organization. Okay. If you don't have that, it's this bastard orphan responsibility, Greg, that I see falling through the cracks. It isn't the CIO's responsibility. It isn't the CISO's responsibility. Is it legal general counsel / HR's responsibility? Whose responsibility is it? That's the number one problem I'm finding in governance structures, governance layers, is it's almost like a bastard orphan responsibility. But because I look at things from a risk management, risk perspective, okay, it's not just security, it's not just privacy, and it's not just compliance, because I'm looking at it from a risk perspective. And if you look at it that way, you're looking at it from a business set of lenses. The business goals and objectives. How much risk are they willing to take? How much cyber insurance do they buy for risk transferring something, right? So all of these things have to tie and align together, but that's what's broken right now in not just large enterprise, but SMB, because the SMB business owner has never thought of these things before. If they're a doctor's office, a law office, or a small marketing firm, they're not thinking that way.
I'm really glad you brought that up, and I want to preface for the audience is like we did not talk about this particular aspect prior to recording the podcast, but The reason why it's timely for me is that I've been increasingly more vocal on platforms, LinkedIn included, and conferences and all that. That the my field right now, the virtual CISO market, is completely different than it was 7 or 8 years ago. And if I could distill it down very succinctly, as simple as possible, it's become more about technical and security program management, doing the stuff like creating policies and business continuity plans and risk and vulnerability
Yeah,
assessments and all that. And then what's missing is that your typical virtual CISO today doesn't really have a solid concept of risk management.
yep,
And I think you just pegged it perfectly as to why that's a risk to SMBs, because ultimately what we're trying to do, what I try to do, what my firm tries to do is that we also try to tie it into risk. And that's why we'll get involved in the privacy side as well too. But we try to understand the risk tolerance of the company. We try to understand the overall other business risks of the company. And so we can help advise where our portion plays, because you can't be like somebody like a security professional and say don't do this, it's bad, and just leave it alone. Well, first of all, from a virtual, I know you don't do the virtual CISO stuff, but from a general SMB consulting standpoint, it would you agree that that's a problem that's missing with SMBs right now, that they need
absolutely.
more about the risk consultant part?
Absolutely. And the best way I help the business owner, I'm talking about when I say small or medium, Greg, to me, small is like 25 humans or less,
Mm-hmm.
one or two business owners. It could be a doctor's office, a law firm, or something of that nature, professional services. Medium to me is about 500 employees.
Mm-hmm.
One could be 1 to 5 physical locations.
Yeah,
Large,
your definition of SMB kind of correlates pretty well with like the SBA's definition of small business, and that's
yeah.
what I usually tell people too.
Okay, good. So we're on the same page when we're saying SMB. I
Mhm.
literally bring out for the SMB, I make them have an audience with their CPA, their accountant, with me. Okay. Then I'm bringing in the insurance underwriter because they have business umbrella liability insurance. And then there's a subset of that called cyber insurance protection with data breach insurance protection. Right.
Mhm.
So I educate the business owner on what exactly are you buying with this cyber insurance policy. Okay. And I educate them on this is what we refer to as risk transfer. The fact that we know you're not fully HIPAA compliant, or the fact that we know you're not fully PCI compliant, that's okay. Because as long as we demonstrate proper forward due diligence, that's a legal term, as long as you demonstrate proper forward due diligence, we have meetings, we have emails, you're not going to get thrown in jail. Okay?
Correct. Right.
You're going to mitigate the penalties and the fines by having and demonstrating proper forward due diligence. So that to me is the starting point of sitting them down with their CPA so they can ask financial money impacting questions. And I'm hitting them with risk transfer versus risk remediate. Because I'd rather they remediate some of these risks. As you know, anything that touches the sensitive data is definitely high priority risk, in my opinion. Okay, fix all of those controls first. And then the people
Or
process
or
ones,
or risk avoidance. If we
or
can
risk
avoid the
avoiding
risk.
completely. Don't even move in that
Right.
business direction. Right. So that's where I
Or
start.
get rid of the information if you don't need it anymore.
And I'm sure you've run across this, but when you're dealing with business owners, entrepreneurs, okay, half of them want to buy that Mercedes for their spouse instead of putting that money into their IT and IT security infrastructure and then training the people and building workflows and procedures that are secure. That's the problem. And the smart small business owner who wants longevity and wants to grow their business is looking at it through a set of risk management lenses. But you have to educate them and teach them. It's the same thing as buying homeowners insurance and car insurance for your house and your car. Why aren't you doing it for your business? Why aren't you mitigating the risks in your business just like you do in your house and your car? It's the same process. But like I said, the entrepreneurs, they think differently. So you have to educate them.
Well, sure, and a lot of them are also, in addition to wanting to buy the boat or the camper, or in my case, I had an airplane for a while. They want to position the company to be sold, and so you want your financials to be as lean and mean as possible. And if you can cut out and sort of like ride that risk wave, if you will, it's just like, well, hopefully nothing will happen to us in the next year. I mean, and that's where I come back to the core risk skill set that's needed for consultants, is that you have to try to understand the mindset of these folks, particularly again the smaller ones and the entrepreneurs, because otherwise you're not going to be able to effectively. You can show them a gap assessment all day, and you can show them pretty little charts that have all the stuff in the red and some in the amber all day. It's not going to penetrate their head. You have to understand that, and that's why, from my perspective, getting back, I'm sorry, I'm on my soapbox, I'll get off in a second. But from my perspective, the virtual CISO market has changed to a point where now it's muddying the SMBs out there where they're not really sure what they're getting. If they just want someone to run their security program, not really give them strategic advice, then that's fine. Hire a virtual CISO or other consultant that just does that. But if you want that strategic advice and you're getting a virtual CISO or whatever you call the consultant,
Yeah.
if you're looking for that strategic advice and you're expecting it and you're not getting it, that's the problem I'm seeing with SMBs today.
Yeah, and I think what you just did with your business service delivery model, you've created the trusted advisor consulting company, mutually
Mm-hmm.
exclusive from your VCSO Services LLC. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. I don't even know what to call it, because putting a label or a title on what you do after 30, 40 years of experience, that's not easy. So
No.
I like using the term trusted advisor.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care what the topic is, because I've seen it in my 35 years. I've probably seen it at least once. So that to me is really how I position, how I help SMBs and enterprise customers. Look at me as your trusted advisor. If you allow me up to the governance layer to talk to the CFO, I'll be able to talk EBITDA and depreciation of assets and CapEx, OpEx with that human to show them that security and privacy assets are actually assets to the company that are depreciable. And I
Mm.
teach these CFOs, look, you have to use OpEx spending dollars to hire a consultant or MSP or MSSP. But for remediation, I've figured out how to use CapEx dollars, Greg, so that they can depreciate that as an asset to the company because it's a foundation. It's like pouring cement if they become SOC 2 Type 1 certified and tested. If they become ISO certified, that's foundational, that increases the asset valuation of that company. So
Absolutely.
I taught
Absolutely.
CFOs how to use CapEx and depreciate that. What a
And,
beautiful thing.
and how many advisors, if you will, today can actually walk down that path? They're just going to give you a spreadsheet that has some things from NIST or this or that,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Do you do it or not? Oh, you need multi-factor. Oh, you don't have it. Well, that's a
Yeah.
high risk." You really don't really.
That's
They
where
don't
I
understand.
think the VCSO stops, or at least
Yeah.
the ones that are bastardizing our industry. They don't
Now it
understand.
does. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So they
It's
stop. It's more of a SecOps role for VCSO. It's not what I call a governance layer trusted advisor helping the business with what they need to do.
Amen. You have articulated, I think, better than I can ever articulate my frustration with what has happened with that. Because back when I started 8 years ago, typically your VCISO were CISOs that had done this before that
Right.
were providing the service on a part-time basis, and now it's muddy. But all of this can be very stressful. And you've been in the industry a long time, and actually, really, only a couple years longer than I have when all is said and done. I mean, back when we first met, you were like this ultra, experienced consultant, and I was like this noob and all that. But in reality, probably maybe about 5 years, something
Yep.
like that. So we've both been doing this for a long time, and in order to stay in this industry for a long time, I have learned that you have to manage your stress effectively. So I encourage people that don't get so bogged down in the job. Make sure that you decompress from this and do it in a healthy way. David, what's one of the things that you do to decompress from the stresses that you've found over your career?
I've been lucky to have a spouse, Greg, that stands by me 100%. I
That's
bring
awesome.
her to business meetings. I bring her to trade shows and conferences when I speak, and she sits in the front row. She's the one that's looking at the people in their eyes to get the feedback and body language of my client and my prospects. And that's what makes it fun because we do it together. And if I work 12 hours, she's working 12 hours with me just by being with me and being next to me. So I don't think of it as work, Greg. I have a lot of passion and it's fun. This is fun for me. But you were right. It was not fun for me doing traditional VC, so GRC assessments and helping clients get to the remediation promised land. That wasn't fun. But
Hmm.
with AI and what's happening with AI, I immediately get to the governance layer. I immediately get to the boardroom because everyone's looking at each other like, what do we do? And how are we going to do it? And they don't know. So I'm thriving in that chaos right now. And the wild, wild west of uncertainty, that's what makes me tick. And I write books, I do webinars, I do training courses. I'm an adjunct professor at a local university. So, like you, it's all about the people. If what
Yeah,
we know up here isn't replicatable or shareable, what good are you? So it's all about people and giving back. This whole industry is about helping that next guy or gal become, up the ladder, if you will. And
absolutely.
I have 4 daughters, one granddaughter, no sons. But I was fortunate to have one out of the fourth daughter. Her name's Nicole. She's going to be following my footsteps, doing IT, cybersecurity at George Mason University starting this fall. So,
Awesome.
yeah. So imagine being able to leave my company and legacy to my kid. And that's what's making me tick right now is that opportunity that I thought all my daughters were going to go into marketing and sales and other more interesting career paths. But this one kid, luckily, wants to do what I do. So,
So that's a nice lead into what are your future plans? Basically, continue to grow what you're doing and to
yes,
prep it as a legacy so that it can be carried on.
yes, prepping it, but with AI transformation being the thing. Like for me, it was divestiture when I started my career. For Nicole, it's going to be AI transformation and enablement. And now, how do I put security, privacy, and compliance around that? That's going to be fun and exciting the next 10 years. Luckily, unfortunately, I think I'm only going to get the front end of that, but at least I got a taste of AI before I finally call it quits.
But the thing I love about it, you talk so much about having fun. That's what I tell people nowadays. I'm like, I don't have to do this anymore. I mean, if you
Yeah,
talk about the traditional walk,
right.
I don't have to do this. I haven't had to do this for a while, but I do it because it's fun. And if you had told my 2001 self while we're driving around in that
Yeah,
freezing truck around campus that one of these days my career would be all about fun and helping, I would have been like, David, you're crazy. You're a crazy consultant. You don't know what you're
yeah.
talking
But you know
about.
what? You had passion when you were 21. You still have it. Ladies and gentlemen, I always refer to Greg as the Anthony Bourdain of cybersecurity. He reminds
with
me of him.
with grayer hair now.
He's a grayer hair world traveler, always shares what he's learned. That's who Greg Schaefer is. I've come to admire him, respect him. He was a previous client of mine. It makes me proud to see how you've grown and evolved from those early days. So congratulations, Greg.
That's a very nice thing to say, David, because I've considered you over the years as one of my early mentors, and I really appreciate that. So,
Thank you.
and I'll make sure that I send you the money that I promised you to say that in Venmo right after. David, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's great catching up, great stories. I love your story, love your passion, and love your insight and particularly about really truly trying to help not only SMBs but everybody out there. I thank you so much.
All right, buddy. Thank you, everyone.
All
Take
right,
care.
and everybody, stay secure.